I rejected my family because they are black. I know this sounds terrible, but hear me out. I've always struggled with my identity. I'm now 37 years old, and people still ask me, "What are you?" when referring to my ethnicity. When I was young, I really did not know how to answer that question, because there was no one like me around. I grew up in almost exclusively white neighborhoods, with a white family, and when there were non-white people around, they were not like me. I mean, I knew what I was, but I did not know how to express it or explain it, or even define it. What am I? Even now I struggle with that. Depending on where in the world I am, I'm sure there are different terms to describe people like me. I guess now, if I were to tell someone, I would say I'm half black and half white. Well, usually I would explain that my mother is French Canadian and my father is African American. This usually works great because it avoids the follow-up questions of, where are your parents from? While that answer usually suffices for most people, I never feel good about it. Is that what I am? So why did I reject my black family? It was not always the case. For a period, I spent summers as a young child with my father and brothers in the United States. However, I was disconnected from them for most of my teenage years. During these years, I started learning about African American history and race relations in the United States. I read a lot. I read books about the one-drop law, systemic racism, and the civil rights movement. I learned about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. I even read books about people who found out their parents or grandparents were passing as white. I read books about slavery and segregation. I learned a lot, but I was missing something that was more important than all the knowledge in those books, the connection with the culture and my family. By this time, I had spent large chunks of my life away from them and was becoming an adult. I was Canadian, and I may have been book smart, but I was not street smart. I did not know or understand the culture. By the time I graduated from college, I was on a mission to reconnect with my family and learn about my culture. I made a point to visit my father, brothers, aunties, uncles, and cousins and nephews. I went all over the United States. I went to large cities, small towns, and prisons to visit family. I met people I did not know I was related to. I looked at old pictures, heard stories. I saw pictures of my grandfather for the first time. It was a world I did not know, but I felt connected to, and it felt good. I'm not sure when things changed. Part of the reason why I'm writing these words is to try to figure that out. When did I not care anymore? When did I go from caring to not wanting them in my life? I will admit it, my memory is terrible. However, there is one part that I remember a lot, and that's the relationship with my father. I remember one time when I was a teenager, probably about 15 years old, I was so angry with him because he promised me something and then just vanished. Someone told me that if I wrote him a letter and then tore it up, I would feel better, and it would help me move on. So I did that. I cried, and then I wrote him that letter and tore it up. It worked for a while. It was more of a band-aid, and honestly, had I never talked to him again, it might have been a solution. I digress, as that topic is for another day. That said, I bring this up to give some perspective. I don't blame my father for the lack of connection to my family. However, that relationship obviously affected the situation. I won't bore you with all the details, but after an incident where he got my hopes up and let me down, I just decided to not try anymore. I think that's when the resentment started. I was in my early 30s and I decided that the energy he brought into my life was negative. So why the sad story? Well, fast forward to the present day, late May, early June 2020. I don't think the words Black Lives Matter have been said by more people in the history of the world. Protests were sparked when a video of a police officer murdering George Floyd, a black man, was shared all over the world. This has brought racial issues to the forefront of the global Western society. That said, this issue specifically took on a more considerable significance in the United States, where protests and marches have continued for 2 weeks so far, currently June 9th. So why did I reject my black family? I didn't really understand why I was so sad watching everything unfold over social media. I was devastated. I was shook up. Every day I was crying or on the verge of crying. I was just straight up sad, and I couldn't figure out why. And then one day I said it. I realized why. And then I said the words that made me write this. I feel guilty. I feel guilty for abandoning my family. Most specifically, what I meant was that I regret making a choice to not understand that part of my culture. At the moment, I was reminded of the struggles around my identity and how they all fit together. Because of a lack of connection to that part of my family, I didn't experience their oppression. As a matter of fact, I overtly distanced myself from that. I felt guilty watching this unfold because those are my people hurting, and I made a decision to be safe in Canada and avoid the stereotypes, the oppression, and the pain that comes from being black in America. I've been following from a safe distance the struggle they go through. I told you already, here in Canada, people ask me, what am I? Well, when I'm in America, people don't ask me what I am. They tell me. They say, you're black. Yeah, I might be light-skinned or high yellow, as I've heard, but there's no doubt for them. Now I sit here and I ask myself, what am I? Am I what people tell me I am? Or am I what I tell people I am? Or does it even matter? Unfortunately, I don't have the answers, and this was simply an exercise for me to think deeper and acknowledge my feelings. I guess if one lesson can be learned from this is that race and ethnicity isn't black and white. There is nuance depending on a lot of different factors. One thing that I am sure about is that culture matters. If I tell you my dad is black and from America, my mother is white from Canada, it says very little about me. Sure, you'll understand why I look the way I look, but that's just how I'm perceived. So what wins? Who gets to decide what I am? Like I said, I don't have the answers. I don't think anyone does. In the end, it's part of my life journey. Maybe I'll never come to a final conclusion. Perhaps I'll just keep transporting to different versions of myself. I always joke with people that I'm racially fluid, so maybe I am. I'll end with this. Be kind to people and try not to assume. If you do, check yourself. When you look at someone, remember you have no idea where they come from, what their interests are, their thought processes, passions, desires, and opinions are. We are all human. We have way more in common than we don't. I encourage everyone to try to focus on what we have in common, try to understand opposing viewpoints, and grow together.